be here, but he is not here, unavailable. So without further ado, I sent out minutes for October 22nd and November 12th, and I'd like to call everybody's attention to that. If anybody has any objections, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for October 22nd, November
I
12th?
have an edit.
Edit, okay.
I would be happy to welcome Mr. Eaton to the community of Daves, but I think he still calls himself Bob. And
Okay,
he's
okay,
here
so it
today.
says Dave Eaton?
Yeah,
Okay, Dave instead of Bob, okay.
thank you.
All right, Dave versus Bob, okay, got it. Which one was that?
Both.
Both of them? Okay. I don't know, okay. All right, so all those in favor of approving with that one change? All right, the minutes will be approved and posted for October 22nd and November 12th.
As corrected.
As corrected, absolutely. All right,
Change your last name.
when we met last, we were talking about the future land use plan. We had gone through a large portion of that, and we had some loose ends that we wanted to address. And that's one of the reasons that Mark is on the web tonight. Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to direct your comments and conversation to complete, hopefully, the future land use plan section of the,
Okay, I am starting with a document that says future land use. Above that, it says revised draft 12/4/24. You may have gotten two different versions of it, one a PDF, since sometimes things that are in a Word document swirl around when they get emailed. So I sent a Word document and a PDF. They're identical. At the last meeting, we went through and looked at all of the future land use plan. Some of that had been revised from the previous meeting. It included two parts, text and a draft of a future land use plan map. At that meeting, I said it was important that you all review the drafts, and I gave a homework assignment to review both the text and the map, and to get me any questions, proposed revisions by I got feedback probably about half of the task force, some of which was detailed editing using track changes. Most of it very helpful, and some of it was more questions, like Mary Ann, can't we go back and add in this and that and the other thing? So what I did is I used some editorial license, and I took the feedback that I got on the text, and I prepared the revised draft that shows the changes in red line, underline for additions, strike through for deletions, and then also I got feedback from Al on the map and area of Route 24 on Orr's Island, and a suggestion that some of that maybe was a stretch for the working waterfront village. And I sat down with Judy and we went through sort of lot by lot and agreed that some of that probably isn't appropriate to be in that village designation. And so you should have received the revised map that cuts how far north from the south end of Moore's Island that goes. In making those revisions, I was guided by a number of properties where there are fairly large lots in which the house is set way back from the road, almost to the shoreline zoning boundary, and it seemed those didn't fit the idea of the village. And then there were another group of lots that are an acre and a half or so, and that's really the purpose of the village designation, is to provide some flexibility for smaller lots. So we revised that. The only consequential editing question where there was disagreement, maybe disagreement is the wrong word, where there were different ways of dealing with it, is on page 1, in the introductory paragraph. David edited it, Al suggested deleting it. One way or another, you should let me know what you want to do. The rest of the edits in here are fairly straightforward. I didn't include 2 of Al's suggestions in the objectives because it seemed to me they went further than the objectives and got into what should be done. And Al can argue for including those. And so then the rest is pretty much editing. And so I think the goal tonight is, before we leave, is to decide if you are comfortable with this, so that, or whether you want to make any additional edits here at the meeting. So I can move that along to Judy, because Judy's going to have surgery the end of next week. And so she's looking to get as much of this done before she's probably on commission for a week or 10 days, and then we're into Christmas. And so this is sort of, if we want to have a final product by January, final draft by January, this is where we got to say, yep, this is what we're comfortable putting in a draft to come back to you in January to take a look at.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the Orrs Island Village District.
Can't hear you, Mary Ann.
Now, can you hear me?
Better.
Okay. Regarding the Orrs Island Village District, can you tell me, I was looking at, I couldn't tell by the map where it stopped. I kind of, when I drive through, get a sense of where the village part ends, which is kind of like at Park Place. Do you know? I'm trying to understand where it stops.
Well, what I was looking at, when you look at the map in orange, it says traditional working waterfront villages.
Right.
And my initial thought was the traditional working waterfront villages in that area really were sort of around Lowell's Cove area and not too far away from Lowell's Cove. I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go in history, but most of the properties along Route 24 right around where, just short of where the fire station is, for example, and on, to me, are not, I don't think it's appropriate to call those traditional waterfront villages, although on the other hand, if you go back in history, basically everything in the town was a traditional, waterfront fishing village. So I was trying to look for a logical place to say, in terms of traditional working waterfront villages, to me, it's much closer to the area right around Lowell's Cove. And I think, Matt, there was a specific area there where there's been a lot of controversy recently about,
Barleyfield Point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right around that particular area is really where the
Yeah.
fishing
Yeah, I catch it.
impetus, if you will, has remained right now. So I think much of beyond that is sort of misnamed, if you will, as in terms of a,
So that brings me to the second part of the question. Because when you think of, I think this might be muted. When you think about Orr's Island Village, that is historical village, we should then be marking that piece that we're not using as, right now, it's not shown as a historical village anyplace, because it should be a different color for that piece. It would seem to me, as you drive through Orr's Island, you go through the fire department, you go past the library, you go past, at least to the library, that's part of what, for those living on Orr's Island, I believe, consider the village for getting the waterfront piece. There's nothing denoting that on the new map.
yeah, I mean, to me, the question is, and I'm not sure, big picture-wise, whether this ultimately is going to make a lot of difference, but it's traditional working waterfront village versus developed neighborhoods. And to me, what we see right now, north of Lowell's Cove is more of a developed neighborhood than a
Right.
fishing
Is it marked-
village.
Is it marked as such? I can't tell.
No, it's not.
So that was my concern.
Okay,
Just that we don't lose that piece of the historic village
yeah, okay.
of Orr's Island.
All right, okay. But I think in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here, when you look at the map, the bottom line, in my opinion, is looking at all these areas, it's really striking when you start taking away conservation areas and resource protection areas and so on. We're really looking at potential areas where development might occur. And, in terms of what we were just talking about, the traditional fishing area versus developed neighborhoods, there's not going to be a lot of development going on in that area. There's just not enough space. So to me, let's not look, don't lose sight of the forest for the trees, if you will. I think the importance of this map is to say, look, we have open land in the interior zone throughout Harpswell, and if we have development in the future, whether it's single-family lots or whatever, that's where it's going to occur. And I don't necessarily think we ought to get hung up too much about what we just talked about in terms of traditional. But to me, it's more accurate to say the area pretty much north of Lowell's Cove along the Route 24 area is an established developed neighborhood, not a traditional fishing area.
Understood.
So,
So we need to change that.
well, yeah, and I think some adjustments have been made, and, they've reduced the size of that. That's fine. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over that if
The
one way
only
or
thing
the
I'm
other.
gonna say, and I'll stop talking about, this map, until we get a committee together, which will take a couple of years,
Yeah.
is going to be looked at people for a while. And I envision people coming and saying, well, you're showing this on the map. So while this is just a rough idea, I wouldn't want to make it too rough. Because when you have a committee later, you're going to get the pushback from people looking at the map for a period of time. And what you've said is fine.
Yeah,
Just think we need to show that developed piece.
okay.
I think Mary Ann makes a good point, and I would emphasize that any time we show a map, I think, in this whole report, there should be a little statement
Can you speak up,
say,
please?
I'm sorry, anytime we show a map in this report, and I think this would probably be true, there might be an exception, there ought to be a clear statement, almost in boldface, saying, this map is illustrative and not definitive of what we're talking about, just so people don't begin to think that this map is actually describing do's and don'ts and shalls and shan'ts. Because I think that's the problem with maps, is people gravitate towards them, and then they think they're a reality.
And they look and say, where's my property on this map?
Yeah, but I think, go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, the future land use plan map is, in the eyes of the state, probably the most important part of the comprehensive plan. So I just caution people to say that the map can have some wiggle room, but in adopting the map, you are saying that the town's basic land use ordinance should be revised to be reasonably consistent with what is shown on the map. So we can't put too big a wiggle words in there.
I defer to you, Mark. I think then it's very clear. The problem is scale. If people see an 8.5 by 11 map, they don't know anything. Mary Ann, you are very helpful because you've been going up and down on this thing and saying what roads were boundaries and so. We have no idea from this map what boundaries are. And so, Mark, if what you say and is correct, and I accept it is, no question, how, at some point, this map has to be delineated quite clearly in terms of boundaries, this road and so on, or this stream, is that correct?
No, I mean, the level of delineation that's shown on what you're holding is adequate. It doesn't have to be, this road from here to here or whatever. And, we can print, that map, as big as you want it to be. I think, at previous meetings, Judy has printed it like 36 inches wide and maybe 54 inches long.
And my understanding is, in the plan itself, there's gonna be a fold-out. The map is gonna be bigger than this. It's not gonna be 8.5 by 11. It's gonna be larger. It's gonna fold out.
11 by 17.
Okay, so, but I think, to me, and I don't know if everybody agrees with this, but to me, when you look at the map, it's almost something that you deduct certain areas from potential development in the future. We have all of these color codes and so on, but when you really look at it from a practical standpoint, what are we trying to convey? We're trying to say that there are certain areas in the town that are not conservation areas, that are not developed villages, that are not fishing villages, and so on and so forth. And so any development that occurs, or in most cases, would be in areas that where all these things are deducted, and you have a lot less to look at, and potential for development in the future. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. I'm not sure if that's true.
Just one point. When we're talking about development for the future, fine. But we're also looking at this as what is considered shoreland fishing
Yeah,
now.
right.
And if we designate this as residential, this creates a problem. Because this is, I assume this is the map we're going to be using once we take this plan. You know what I'm saying? So if you're showing something as shoreline residential, that would preclude that if someone wanted to do some fishing from their house, they're not going to be able to, if I understand that correctly.
Commercial fishing.
Right. And you do have a lot of small neighborhood docks in an area that are along the shore on this area of an Norris Island. I mean, that is the issue I think we got to be careful with.
Just speaking from own experience where I live, and I'm looking at the map, it's either green or yellow.
Right.
Which is either residential or inland shoreline protection. Yet the fact is, and in fact, none of our neighbors nor us objected when somebody put up basically a fishing plant right on the water's edge. It was an eyesore, quite frankly, and so on, but we all said, hey, if we're a working waterfront community, this is what we do. And so it's up there. And so I think that undercuts, that questions what you're suggesting, because as far as I know, this person was able, with the planning board, to put this structure up, even
Because-
though it was yellow, residential shoreline and resource
I'm
protected.
not sure about that.
The
Wasn't that-
commercial fishing trumped it.
I thought that it was commercial fishing one.
There's a difference between shoreline residential and commercial fishing zones 1 and 2.
Oh, and 1 and 2 aren't on this map, are they?
Not anymore.
That's
So
so, yeah, that answers my question.
that would not have been allowed if it was in a shoreline residential area. If it was a commercial fishing zone 1 or 2, and I'm not exactly sure which one you're talking about, it would have been allowed because that's the point of having those specific commercial fishing zones.
Then we're back to Mary Ann's point, which I think is a good one.
That's the point. I just want to be sure, because until we do a really good study, I would hate to take away what is now commercial fishing 1 and 2 with this map, because it would preclude any fishing from a wharf, private.
It's north of,
And I know there's one on Orr's Island.
oh, you're right.
You might know,
Yeah.
Well, it's what we were talking about before. It's off of Lowell's Cove is the one area that,
no, this is on Harpswell Sound side.
It looks as, yeah,
on Orr's Island?
Yeah,
detailed as I can foresee it. It looks.
I think it's down someplace, I'm trying to remember, someplace between Homes and Harbors, that area in there. Matt, you might know, I'm not sure. It's a fellow from
The real
Bailey.
estate, Homes and Harbors Real Estate?
Yeah, that section of the road gets wider. And currently, we'd have to look at the map to be sure. But my concern, because this is an overall generalization, we don't forget about this and not realize it
Yeah.
and remove it. I think I pretty much looked to compare the two maps, and they pretty much are the same. I brought up some questions to Mark where I thought could be a problem. For that reason, just how the water's being used now already. As soon as you make shoreland residential, you are asking for pushback from residences.
Lookout Point's another one.
Yeah,
That's shoreline residential, and there's a commercial wharf there.
There's a commercial wharf and
Lookout Point, Henry Allen Seafood.
yeah.
Two of them now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could, I think we could pretty quickly compare the two as they look. Compare the shoreland zoning map now and be pretty specific to at least mirror that, I would think, until we could actually study it and make changes.
Okay, Mark, what's your recommendation here?
The shoreland designations that are shown on here
This is
mirror
wrong.
the current shoreland zoning map, except
And this,
for combining
yes.
the
Alan.
CF1 and CF2
Okay.
into the areas
This is Allen
along the shoreline that are
Point.
shown
Lookout is the
in
next one
blue.
on the left, which is,
And that makes the
But that kinda looks like Lookout Point.
The language that describes that designation says you can't develop new residential or new non-marine, non-residential uses in that area, 250 feet of the water,
this is right.
and you can redevelop existing residential uses, but you have to relocate them out of the 250 feet if it's possible. Otherwise, you can reconstruct it and presumably it would, go through the
Exactly,
same
that's
kind of
where it should
process
say
it
Harpswell
does
Central.
now, where planning or code says,
It should be written as
is
the.
it meeting the setback requirement and whatever to the greatest possible extent. The one thing that's not on here is that Matt and Margaret are involved in a process with Judy, separate from the comprehensive plan, to map the coastal resource protection areas in a way that are consistent with the DEP guidelines. That's in progress. The goal is that that would go to March town meeting, and presumably, if that happens, that it would be integrated into a future iteration of this map and a note removed. There is a strategy in here that says the town should undertake a review of the shoreline zoning. My understanding is that you all decided early on in the process that you were gonna get into trying to review the shoreline zoning boundaries districts as part of this process, but you would put it out there as something that needs to be done. That's what the plan says. I think the issue of combining the CF1 and CF2 is more restrictive. Currently, in the CF2, you can develop residential uses. Once you get more than, I think it's 75 feet from the water, if I remember correctly, this would prohibit that.
Good. I And you might have answered that question for me, Mark, because I was concerned that this did reflect the shoreland zoning map now, as far as commercial fishing 1 and 2. And it does.
Those are the areas that are currently zoned CF1 and 2.
Yeah, okay. That was my concern, that when we changed this piece of Orr's Island, we were losing that.
Do you guys have any?
We retract,
Yeah.
I retract my last statement. It confused me. Harpswell Center was just further, written on the map further north, but it is right.
Okay.
Can we adjust that, move where it says Harpswell Center further south on the map, the text? That'd be a minor adjustment. I think most people consider Harpswell Center the area from, say, Kellogg Church down to the north end of the Allen Point Road, Kicker Hall, that area. So, Brian asked a question about Lookout Point, and I first glanced and I said, oh, yeah, he's right, it's zoned wrong.
So Harpswell,
Actually, just move the text where it says Harpswell Center,
okay.
south of Lookout Point Road, between Lookout Point Road and Allen Point Road. Just, I think that's the area, where the tennis courts are and the Kellogg Church. I think that's what most people consider
The church
Harpswell Center.
in the old town hall.
Okay.
So
Exactly.
the Harpswell Center is only an identifier. Where do you want to move it?
I just want to move the text south of the Lookout Point Road, between there and the north end of the Allen Point Road.
Yeah, further south on 123.
Okay,
On this map, if you moved it about an inch south, I just,
That's a lot, an inch.
Allen Point Road ends in a blue designation,
Right.
commercial fishery.
correct?
Both ends.
Yep.
Clark Cove Road, that's all commercial. Maybe it's Clark Shore Road or Clark Cove Road.
Right.
That's all commercial.
Okay.
There's.
All right, that's easy to do. I think the bottom line to me, in terms of the comprehensive plan, is if this is a reasonably accurate representation to convey to the town that we've identified a number of different categories which are outlined in various colors and so on. But to me, the bottom line is, what are we trying to say here? We're trying to say that there's not a, when I look at this, there's not as much open space available as one would normally think of driving down the road. There are conservation areas, there are various other areas that when you look at this, it has implications for where potential development in the future could occur in the town. It's mostly it's in the interior zone. We're trying to put things in the interior zone. We're trying to spread it out throughout the town. But also, when you look at this, there are a variety of different restrictions based on this particular designation that will limit where you can put future development. That's what it says to me. Whether or not, we're accurate to the exact block or whatever, to me is maybe less important, and that would have to be something that would be taken up by, a planning board or code enforcement or whatever. Can you put a house here? But I think in terms of what we're trying to do in the comprehensive plan, it's saying there are lots of various restrictions and areas that are gonna preclude development in the future. And most of this land is privately owned. And so even more restrictions, which you don't see here. But I don't know, I guess my bottom line is hopefully, if we make that change and move Harpswell Center a little bit further south, is this something that this task force can live with?
It's just like Mark said, it's just an identifier.
Yes, sir.
before you leave tonight, somebody should take one of the maps and draw an oval where you want Harpswell Center to be, and email it to me, and we'll put it there.
Okay, we got it. We'll do this.
And now I have to admit, where it says draft future land use is really tiny, probably my mind took it as being more of a map and looking for the future.
Okay,
So maybe we can highlight that piece.
all right, Mark,
Yeah, you had it too, you had the same thing.
Same thing, basically,
With an
yeah.
arrow,
yeah, okay. All right,
Yeah, whichever.
we'll get it to you. All right, anything else, anything else on
Mark up
this?
anything else
Just a
you want
question.
to buy.
Sir.
At one point, the town put together an open space plan.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem to be included in this
Yeah.
one.
Was added, Mark did add it, because I brought that up, right, Mark? The open space plan?
The open space plan is included in the text,
Right.
it's not included on the map.
Okay.
Are there additional areas that need to be cordoned off, if you will?
We can't,
Can't because,
because it's not an ordinance that you can't build there.
okay,
It's a suggestion, and most of
Okay.
it, most of what is in the focus areas of the open space plan are shown on here with various designations.
okay.
All right.
But Mark did add it to the,
All
to
right.
his changes on that text.
Okay, so with this specific change here, do I get buy-in from
You
the
got buy-in.
task force that
Yes.
this is good?
Yeah.
All right, Mark,
Thanks, Mark.
what do you need? What else do you need?
Okay, back to the text. Do we leave the introductory paragraph in and edit it as proposed, or do we take it out entirely?
Okay, since I recommended taking it out entirely, let me sort of, I'm looking to make things a little bit more concise. I think that, I don't think that there's a whole lot that this first paragraph adds that's not discussed in one form or another in the rest of the text. And to start this particular thing with the current situation, to me, is a logical place to begin, rather than to have a preceding paragraph entering into the current situation. I just think it's not needed. But, since Peter's not here to defend his change, I mean, I'm just looking for a way to kind of compress this a little bit.
But it is an introduction.
Yeah, but again, when you say the current situation, paragraph, when you start with paragraph A, that is an introduction, basically, when you look at it.
I think you're correct. I think the sentiment in either paragraph, edited or unedited, is a good sentiment. It belongs, the content belongs up in the introduction to the entire plan, quite frankly.
Okay,
But it should come out of this section, so I think you're onto something.
yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll look to incorporate some of these words either in the executive summary or introduction, okay?
Big place to put it.
All right. All right, I'll take that for action.
Al, tell me again what you decided?
All right, we're gonna delete the first paragraph from this particular section.
Okay,
But we'll look to put some of these words, the sentiments, to make sure they're reflected in either the executive summary or the introduction or some other appropriate place.
Okay.
Swear in the document.
And I'll take,
sounds good.
I'll take that,
Okay, then, I'm gonna keep going very quickly. Page one, there's just a couple of editorial things. Page two, same sort of thing.
Oh, wait a second.
instead of for example, residential development over the past, the original text said couple of decades. I said
Right,
over the past few decades, it's
Right.
wordsmithing like that. you know,
Right.
you know, happy's the glad, more or less, but,
Anything about the edits on page 2?
Nope.
Anything about the edits on page 3?
okay, the underlined section is added on, is that correct?
That's correct. It's the top of my page 3.
We want Harpswell. Your page 3 starts with, "We want Harpswell."
Yeah, right.
That is correct.
So the underlined section, there's not necessarily a clear direction for some of the major issues facing Harpswell. Maintaining the working waterfront, dealing with growth in the short-term rentals, managing the use of groundwater, and addressing housing affordability will require additional study and debate. Do we want to keep that in, or we need to say that? Or do we not have to say that?
Peter's not here to argue for it.
Right.
I'm lost, because I reprinted this bigger, so I'm,
Page, okay, so it's page 3.
land use objectives.
There's an underlined colored section that we're talking about, says there is not a necessarily clear direction. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Peter's suggestion.
Is that section something that we want to retain, or does it go without saying that, do we have to state that, I guess?
I think they're stated frequently in lots of places in the document, as it is.
Anybody else?
Al,
Yes,
I'm gonna speak for Peter, since he's not here. As the comment says, this was only part of a broader, thing from Peter, in which he said, the way the document is presented, it suggests that there is sort of unanimous agreement on a number of these things. And I think Peter felt that there needed to be some qualification of what's included to say that, there still needs to be ongoing discussion about a number of these issues.
okay. Fair point. Anybody else? I mean, I don't have any problem with one way or the other. I'm totally neutral on this. Yes, sir.
I think David's point is a good one. If there is repetitive language appearing other places, I would tend to take it out the other places and not here, but somebody should take care of that. And if they're more important than the other places, then take it out here, because I don't think we should be repeating ourselves. That's an editorial choice. I like this
Managing the
wording.
use of groundwater comes up again and again and again.
Yeah,
It seems to me we don't need to put it here.
yeah. Okay, so let's do this, Mark. Let's leave it in. And then, if it's determined by, is Matthew the right person? Matthew James, our editor?
CRA or Judy?
Well, Judy's gonna,
No, he's your manager.
he's the editor.
Don't pick it
All
up.
right, I'll check that, and if
Okay. All right, I'm writing Al.
Al,
Next
yep,
to that.
big Al.
Okay.
All right,
Under the bullet points, David did some editing that I included in there. And Al, you had some suggestions that I did not include. You want to bring those up? And the reason I didn't include them was that, to me, objectives are sort of statements of what we're trying to do, not necessarily the specific way that we're gonna do it. And so I think there were one or two places I didn't include them.
In looking at this, since none of these things pop directly to the top of my head, I'm fine with the way this reads right now.
Okay.
I'm not gonna fall on my
anything else
sword.
on Page 3? Page 4?
Move right along. Nothing there.
No changes on page 4 that I see.
Or 5. Oh, no, 5 has. That's a good change. Best available evidence.
Okay, this goes back to the discussion we had last time about science and so on and so forth. Decisions on groundwater on best available evidence instead of science,
Yes.
okay? That's page 5.
All right, anything else on page 5? No?
Nope.
I'm going to keep rolling.
6 looks good.
Page 6?
Okay, so under 5.2, policy 5.2, deleted, revised floodplain management ordinance and shoreline zoning ordinance to require that a new construction or reconstruction be sited and elevated based on future flood elevations, which are
So the
I'm
comment
surmising-
was
Strike.
to strike the based on
right.
future flood elevations, cause that is the impact of sea level rise.
Right,
First copy.
And so I think.
Considering the impacts of sea level rise.
David's comment, to strike that.
okay, that's good. Any objection to that? All right, page 7,
Okay, I'm on page 7.
nothing. Pure as a baby.
Okay, 8,
Change his diaper.
a couple of just little
Yeah, happy's the glads,
required,
yeah.
taken out in a couple of places. Uh, 9,
Same thing, we're reducing it by a few words, which is
Yep.
good in the right direction.
all right, 10,
Is that something?
Okay, so, major subdivisions,
No, rural area.
5 or more lots.
Where are you?
I'm on page 10 in the first rural areas, under rural areas.
Oh, okay.
5. Okay, so major subdivisions, 5 or more lots. I think the original text had 5. It's a
Well,
it's a
just
G,
the numeral.
it's an English thing, right?
Spelling it out.
If you don't have more than,
Stop.
okay, 5, yeah, if you're in single numbers,
5 or 5,
5, yeah,
the numeral or the word.
yeah, 5 or more lots. Okay, yeah, that's a minor, happy to glad type thing. My English,
All right.
then page 11, future land use map is intended to guide the town, to guide town revisions of its land use zoning map. Okay,
Oh, good.
these locations and boundaries may differ somewhat, it's kind of what we talked about before. These locations and boundaries may differ somewhat from what is depicted on the future land use map, as long as they respect the underlying concepts. So I guess what I interpret that to mean is, we don't have to be, letter,
Worrying about millimeters.
yeah, perfect, as long as we adhere to the general concepts of what the map tries to convey. Is that your interpretation, Mark?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, so future land use. Can we say that this text with those revisions and the map with the revision that we identified represents the task force, the best the task force comes up with at this perspective, at this point in time?
Agreed.
Amen.
At this point in
The
time,
minutes should reflect our
Amen.
gratitude to Mark for helping us.
Amen.
yeah.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
in the next day or two, I will incorporate the edits. If you send me the changes to the map, by the end of the week, we will have a clean copy of the text and the map that I will circulate to you all. At the same time, I give it to Judy, to begin incorporating it into the draft. If you have anything that you see that you wanna, change, question, you probably have until like January 2nd to do that, before we have a final version.
Okay,
After which you will be shot if you suggest anything of the sort.
okay, future land use plan, I think we spent 3+ meetings on that. I think we've,
Okay, next
We're there.
one. This is something that you've already, dealt with, but I wanted to give you, sort of the clean version, and that's the housing section.
Yeah.
The task force discussed this back in October. Amy suggested some additions and some changes that were incorporated, and you got that. And I tried to go back through and clean this up some, but if you get to page 42, I don't know why the font is the way it is, because that's not what it says the font is, but this is where, again, this we go to Judy to be cleaned up and put into her. She uses a different font, a different software, and she lifted stuff out that I could edit. And so, this is there, we went over this, made some changes, and this is sort of the final draft, if you're okay with it.
but the bottom line, Mark, is that this section basically corresponds to the Affordable Housing Working Group report.
Exactly.
And I mean, the select board has already bought off on that. They've blessed it, if you will. For us to deviate at this point doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Asking for a lot of
This,
trouble.
well, Al and members of the task force, there is one important difference
Oh, hell.
between what's in here and what's in the Affordable Housing Working Group report. The Affordable Housing Working Group report includes a sentence under other issues that essentially says the select board may want at some time to look at the feasibility of using Mitchell Field and Dowdy Point for housing. That is not included in an activity that the comprehensive plan proposes doing. And it's purposefully not included because the language in the report is sort of just the, keep the toe in the door kind of language that says if a select board at some time wants to do this, they should tell the housing committee to look at the feasibility. So the comprehensive plan does not propose any, actions, any strategies relative to doing anything with respect to those two areas.
Well, I can tell you as somebody who was involved with those meetings and took a few barbs in the face, people don't like the idea of developing at this point in time,
And
affordable housing in
whatever
those
the
two
comprehensive
town-land
plan
areas,
is,
including Mitchell Field.
10 to 15-year horizon.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, the comprehensive plan, I don't think we need to,
Include all those.
no.
We don't need it, because the
Okay,
select
is
board can
everybody
do anything
set
it
with
damn well
housing?
pleases in the future anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we took it out.
Okay.
yeah, take it out, yeah.
Again, I'm gonna give that to Judy. Then the third thing you should have, or fourth thing, is a pretty colored chart.
The,
The draft of the plan
Should be in the pile there.
includes an implementation strategy that's required, by the state rules,
Yeah.
which says, tell us how you're gonna do all these wonderful things you said you're gonna do.
right,
And there is a table in there that goes through each of the sections, waterfront economy, natural resources,
Right.
et cetera. And there is one for housing.
right,
Essentially, what I did is I edited, the housing table to reflect what is in the document that we just looked at.
right,
And so this says, in the housing section, it says, conduct a vulnerability analysis to understand effect of sea level rise and storm surge on housing. And then if you get down to H2:1, it's one, it says, yep, it's a medium time frame, and it should be done by the, Resilience and Sustainability Committee. And so I, sort of reflected some of the things that were in the March draft, and, put those things in. HHC is Harpswell Housing Committee. CPIC is a to-be-formed Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee. I think that's all the ones. PB is Planning Board.
just a question, Mark, anywhere in the plan, I can't recall, have we defined what a time frame of short, medium, actually, mean, we
Yeah,
talking,
in the introduction to this, it's there.
okay,
And I couldn't find it the other day, to be perfectly honest.
okay, so that's something we need to make sure that,
Write it down.
Do you have the plan, the March plan?
I have a plan here, introduction.
Go to the implementation strategy. I think it's the last chapter of part 1.
All right,
I gave my copy to Matt, and that was the wrong thing to do.
implementation plan.
What page?
88.
Oh. Abbreviations? What are we looking for there, Mark?
The definition of what short-term, medium, short-term, I don't see any definitions here. So,
No, there it is. Short term, 1 to 2 years, medium, 3 to 5, long term, more than 5.
which page is that?
It's on the, it's on, with the picture of the, it's the first, it's total,
Okay,
Page number?
it's the, well,
Okay, yeah, okay.
87 in my printing.
all right, got it. Okay, so
Yeah,
it,
and that was sort of the frame I was using.
okay,
I
so
thought
it's,
that's what it
it's in
was,
there,
but-
okay.
Greater than 5 years, we're all dead.
And Mark, that matches the
Whoa,
sustainability.
easy
plan.
now, whoa.
At least for some members of this committee.
I says it matches the
Got a couple
sustainability
youngsters.
plan.
I'm hoping to see a couple more moves.
Wait, let's put it to a vote, George.
We're having too much fun.
Okay, so it's defined in the plan, that's good.
Right.
I have one question about the housing section. And it has to do with, the last part, limit the use of new attainable housing or the conversion of existing year-round housing into seasonal or short-term rental units. I recall when the seasonal, I can't remember what the committee was, short-term rental committee was founded. There was a lot of heartache and heartburn by a number of people in this community about messing around with short-term rentals because it impacted the way a lot of them made a living. So I'm just looking at this and saying, if we come out in this plan and say, essentially, we're arguing not to expand short-term rental inventory, if you will, in the town. I'm wondering what people think about the politics of that.
When did this get added?
Mr. Chairman,
When did this
if
get
you
added?
go back
Was it
to
in the
the
original
housing
draft?
section.
He just-
page
he just-
Hang on.
42, there is a goal 4. That language does not come from the Affordable Housing Working Group. They said they would like to deal with it, but they weren't gonna put it in that report. The language that's under goal 4 came from you all. And I think the leader of that proposal was the vice chair, I think her name is Amy Heibel. That was one of the edits that you all proposed back in October to the original draft, which was to add that entire goal 4. So that's up to you. If you wanna deal with it, you gotta deal with it in the section first, and then we deal with it in the implementation strategy. So if you wanna go back to goal 4 on page 42, that's where that language comes from.
So my question is this gonna be restricting people that say rent a cottage for a week? I mean, a
No, I
lot of
think-
these folks get as much in a week as they could make in a month.
Yeah, I
They-
think-
They change, in the summertime, they rent weekly instead of monthly, so
Yeah, I think what it's also,
that
what
would
it's
be a
saying
huge
is sort
restriction
of,
on them.
is sort of discouraging the,
Conversion of existing year-round housing, it says.
yeah, it's discouraging the development of short-term rental in the town in favor of long-term or permanent residence. And
Now go back.
yeah,
Because policy 4.1 and policy 4.2 are different. Policy 4.1 essentially says, if the town gives you, I'm gonna call it a break on density or lot size or other things to create an attainable unit, affordable unit, you can't then turn around and make it a short-term rental. And I think that was discussed by the task force, that, we shouldn't be allowing people to do that. Policy 4.2 is a little more roundabout, that says the town should, I'm going to use the word restrict the conversion of existing year-round units into short-term rentals. And, there are a number of properties in the town that were year-round housing that have been bought up and converted into short-term rentals, and that's a policy question.
Yeah.
Sir,
I wondered if these things are really legal to do, to, you know, just somebody's private property and they build on it and then they decide to have it for summer rentals. And the other thing is, a lot of these subdivisions are full of people who only use it in the summer. You know, it's like $1 million houses that are short-term rental, basically.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I raised the question, because I know that, in listening to a number of the meetings that were held, maybe less than a year ago, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
There were some very strong opinions voiced about short-term rentals and the fact that if you start messing around with restricting them in some form or fashion, you were going to impact a part of the community that made a living off of that as a business, if you will. I don't know, I just raised the question, I'm just wondering, in terms of the comprehensive plan, whether we ought to jump off the end of that gangplank. Yes, sir.
I think Mark, you said that policy 4.2 was a little more, sort of, to use my term, loosey-goosey, but then you proceeded, if I heard you correctly, on 4.2.2 strategy to switch the word manage to restrict, and that's not loosey-goosey. I don't have a problem with 4.2 because it's using the words like limit and review and manage, which are all kind of, we use our best judgment and defer to others' judgment. So I don't have a problem with that. But if you start to use the words like restrict, then I think, Al, your point comes into play.
There's nothing in here that says under 4.2 to restrict.
No, there
Oh, I
isn't.
just heard you use that. I misheard you then,
I
sorry.
know, I did, but it doesn't really say that.
Yeah, no, it
It
doesn't.
says to manage the number of
Right.
short-term rental
Which is good.
units.
Man,
I mean, I'll go with what the task force thinks. I mean, should we let this stand, if you will, as part of our,
Is this a going forward or a,
I mean, I think Mark is looking for something that says task force approves this goals, policy, and strategy outline.
Well, George, I think it's
Yeah,
saying,
and I'm gonna, Brian's question, about legality, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not gonna really answer that question, except to say that many communities in Maine, with good quality legal advice, have adopted limitations, restrictions on short-term rentals and creating them and regulating them, and, so this is something that is not unique to Harpswell. There are probably dozens or more coastal communities that have instituted restrictions of one form or another relative to short-term rentals, and because of their impact on the year-round supply of affordable housing.
and to George's point, on 4.1 is talking about the use of attainable housing to be converted. And it would seem to me that houses that were built under attainable housing, there was some kind of break given to build it in the first place. And they're talking about going forward.
Yeah.
so actually what you're saying is going back and restricting those?
No, I think it's saying, right now, other than the one subdivision we have in town, there isn't any other, quote, attainable housing classification.
Okay.
In other words, what you're saying is Hamilton Place, if somebody were to convert and try to do something short-term rental, can't, I don't think they could do that legally, but,
They can't do it because of the
The covenants.
covenants that are there.
yeah.
And I think the same thing would be true
Yeah.
on anything that would come in the future. So I'm comfortable with that.
So,
So that's enough.
yeah,
The covenants we don't need to put it in as a special item, or is
Well,
that-
this is going forward, this is saying new. So in the future, my thinking is, this is fine because future attainable housing that goes in is going to have some kind of break to
In
allow
other
them to
words,
do it.
there's nobody currently doing this anyway.
No.
Okay.
Al?
sure.
A comment and a question. The only comment I have on the attainable or the short-term rental thing is we're trying to make this more public-friendly, and I think we're opening ourselves up to the firing squad by going down that rabbit hole potentially. But I'll go with whatever the group wants. And my question is what is attainable? If we're gonna use attainable, like, shouldn't we define attainable?
Well, attainable is defined specifically by the state. And it's a question of, it
There's
has
an
to do with the
income.
income level of, and, Mark, you can help me out, you're probably better versed than I am, but there's a specific definition for
No, it's not
attainability.
defined by the state, it's actually, a creature of the town.
Oh, okay.
That's better.
What's affordable?
Well, what did the town say?
Affordable.
Oh,
is
I'm sorry, I was thinking about affordable, all right.
Probably by 20 different ways, depending upon who's defining it.
Yeah,
If you're talking about a tax credit rental housing, it's defined as being 50 or 60% of area-wide median income.
yeah,
If you're talking about the new state affordable housing law, it's 80% of area-wide median income for rental units and 120% of area-wide median income for.
yeah, that's what I was thinking of, I was thinking about
If you're
affordable,
talking
not
about
attainable.
the new rental, small unit rural rental program, it's 100% of area-wide median housing. Some programs count median housing as a family, and establish one level for a family. Other programs establish different, income levels depending
I think Bob wants to
upon
retract his
how many
question.
people live in the unit.
Okay,
The bigger the family, the higher the income limit to qualify.
okay, let me go back, I misspoke, I was thinking about affordable housing rather than attainable housing, which,
Right.
okay, so, but my basic question is this, when we look at something that says limit the conversion of existing year-round housing, how do you do that? I mean, what that says to me is that, well, some people can do it and then some people can't, and there's some kind of mystical number or limit, a way to limit the number of, I just think we're getting into,
A can of worms we don't need to get into.
I read that too, as, there's a preference that the select board has already established a housing committee and working group,
Yeah.
whatever it is. That's up to them to decide that they would do that. Because if we don't say what the limit is, then the presumption is we're suggesting that an appropriate body will decide that. And I think that's fine. I like that idea, frankly.
all right, so, I raised that question because I'm not sure the comprehensive plan ought to come down one way or the other on short-term.
We'll look at a place to put a definition in here, because I think the housing committee is, struggling with that and wants to be able to answer that question.
Okay, fair enough.
How's that?
That sounds great. All right, have we exhausted our brain cells on housing tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So I think with that caveat, I think this goals, policy, and strategy section on housing looks good. Everybody agree? All right. Just a quick, and I want to be sensitive to time, because I don't want people to get out on the road with freezing and stuff like that happening, but, all right, timeline. March 8th is town meeting. And I think it's still unclear in my mind whether we need to have a public hearing 30 days prior or something less than that. February 8th is 28 days prior to the town meeting. It's a Saturday. And the other question I have is it better to have a public hearing on a Saturday than a weeknight in February? You know, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'd like to hear what everybody thinks about that. Would people be more likely to come up to a public hearing on a Saturday morning, or 6:30 and Thursday, or whatever?
It could go long,
Well,
so maybe Saturday isn't a bad idea.
okay, so if we do Saturday, to me, February 8th is 28 days before town meeting, which means we would have to get, I don't know, permission, or we need some understanding as to whether or not having a meeting 28 days before the town meeting is acceptable. And I don't know the answer to that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
as you and I have discussed with Matt, that really is a legal question, and Maine Municipal Legal probably can answer that fairly quickly. You and I cannot ask Maine Municipal that question. That question has to come through a member of the town staff to sort of lay out the history and look at the state law. I think the plain reading of the state law is that this is a second public hearing to address comments from the first public hearing, and as such, you only need, under town policy, 7 days notice. But that's probably not reasonable in terms of putting it out there and giving the public a chance to respond to it. But I think either Matt or Christie needs to ask the question of Maine Municipal as to whether they think, what they think the notice requirements are.
Okay, I will take it upon myself to contact Christie and Matt to get an answer on that. If they say February 8th is good, my recommendation, my proposal would be to have a public hearing on Saturday, February 8th, because I think more people will feel comfortable attending a meeting on a Saturday morning in February rather than at night in February.
Yeah.
And then the only other question I would have, assuming that's correct, and I'll get the answer out to everybody. Do we
Now,
need,
the only other thing you should do is look at the sort of other events that get held.
right, Okay.
to make sure there's nothing,
Right,
competing.
right.
That won't be, Patriots Day, no, not Patriots Day, what happens in February, is that Patriots Day, yes. That'll be the
Indigenous
following
peoples,
week.
they're not.
But whether the schools have anything planned or
Okay,
anything that's a big,
okay,
conflict with people coming.
okay, we'll do that. The only other question I have is, do you guys and Gail think we need to do anything more than a public hearing prior to the town meeting? Because if that's the case, then we're gonna have to have some other meetings in January, basically.
Can we do some one-on-one type things? If
What do you
people are
mean?
willing to talk with the group that they're involved with?
In other words, leave it up to the task force to go out and,
I mean, we'd have to set it up, but people haven't heard about this since last April.
well, yes and no. I mean, we've been keeping the comprehensive plan in front burner through the anchor.
Yeah.
And I guess we've had one TV event, and that was less than successful for a variety of reasons. One was technical, but I'm not sure. I mean, I was thinking, well, maybe we ought to have another television event, Harpswell TV or something. We could do that and talk about, here's where we are and so on. That's a possibility, but I'm thinking if we have to arrange to have a series of meetings like we tried to do earlier this year, we're gonna have to get cracking on, you know, when and where and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering what everybody thinks about that.
When would the final draft be available to the public? Prior.
We're hoping into January. Well, hoping into January, right, Mark?
So you're gonna give people a week to look at this?
No, to end of February 8th would be a month and a week.
Well,
Not from the end of January,
For the end of January or?
Mark, the,
giving them 8 days
No.
if you want them to participate. I mean, they need a chance to look at it. We're at what, 300 pages now? We cut it back, even if it's 200. Nobody's gonna sit down and read 200 pages, even in a week. They're gonna look it over here and there when they have a minute.
Can we check with Mark what date they would have the final? He's not hearing us.
well, I mean, I'll contact the town staff and find out, first of all, if we need to be 30 days before the town meeting to have a public hearing. If we have some wiggle room there, we can move it up a little bit further in February, give people more time to, hopefully that's the right answer.
Even,
That's the answer we-
even at that rate, if we, so say we're allowed to do it 28 days prior to the meeting, we give them a period to read the plan, they look at it, and there's still a significant amount of people that are not happy with where it's at, and it may get shot down.
Yeah.
That doesn't give us a chance from the 8th to the meeting to revise it, to do any work to revise it, to try and,
What if we were able to set up a couple of Saturdays, once we get the date, that we'll have the final draft and it can be published? We could have some people set up at the library?
I'm just saying, unfortunately, time's running short.
Yeah,
I
I was
mean,
hoping
we've done well the
Matt
past
would
few
be here
months.
Because,
We still haven't gotten the date. Ask the date.
Estimate is when it's available, we haven't heard that yet.
well, yeah. When do you think, based on everything you know and your sense, when do you think it's reasonable to expect?
I think, here's what I'm gonna say. I think you should leave at least a week, 10 days between the time that the select board needs the final document to be voted on and the formal public hearing. Because I'm kind of in the George camp here, is that if there are one or two things that get people excited, they're able to be fixed or removed, you could do that. Many communities don't do that, but, you know, to me, given where we are, that would make sense. The second, I do think it would be good to do some kind of, let's call it pre-public hearing meetings, where people could hear about what's in the plan, what's been changed, answer questions, etc., before you get to the public hearing. And that might only be, you know, a couple of times in the week or two before the public hearing. Because I think, as George says, there's a lot there, and I think not spoon feeding it, but giving people opportunities, not so much to testify, but more to understand what's been done, to revise the plan, what's different, what's in it. I think the first round of meetings were wound up dealing with only a couple of issues and didn't really deal with a lot of what's actually in the comprehensive plan.
Okay. All right.
Gears are working.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that we worked throughout the summer to put out sections of the plan was to expose, hopefully, people to the scope of what we were talking about. And then I don't know if people had a chance to read the December anchor. What I tried to do there was say, you know, we responded to the key things that were brought up, housing and so on, and the fact that we have gone through the entire plan, we've reviewed it, and we heard what you said, and here's some of the things that we did. You know, it's hard to know how that resonated with the populace.
I think people are not thinking about this every day like we are,
Yeah.
and they may have read an article in the summer and put it aside, and they may have missed a couple. It's not until we start getting ready to actually pass this, we are going to have questions. And the more that we could do before a hearing, I think, is more productive. Like
Maybe,
George said.
yeah, maybe at the public hearing, we could do some sort of a mock of what it's gonna be like at the town meeting, a mock-up of that. Because there'll be people that'll stand up and say, well, I'm opposed to this, but if it was worded this way. And then, you know, it goes to the board, right, the select board, and they say, we're able to do that, let's reword it right here. Is everyone fine? Maybe if we could do that sort of a mock-up and a show of hands, and then we'll have a good feeling of whether it's gonna go or not. And, if it's obvious as it's not, then unfortunately, there's more work to be done.
Say, I'll vote against it if it's like that, and somebody else says, no, I'm
Well,
gonna vote against that version.
You know, just hopefully the people that are gonna participate are
All right,
interested
so
in
let me,
making suggestions, I guess would be my.
Could I, if at the public meeting, which we're gonna assume is gonna be on the 8th of February, to be determined, some obvious, this committee has been very responsive to public input, and I think you documented that well in the anchor article. If more stuff comes up at the public meeting that 30-day rule about publishing before it goes to the town meeting, does that set the clock back if we meet on the 9th of February and say, oh my God, we got to revise the land use section?
That's kind of why
And
I
if
would
we
hope we
revise
could
it,
make those adjustments
Yeah.
at this mock-up,
Does it,
or
does-
town,
yeah, does the
whatever we're
30,
calling it.
does the 30-day
presentable.
rule mean if we do some editing of the thing, we have to go back again?
Here, look at what the state law says is that prior to voting on the adoption comprehensive plan, the planning group, that's you, has to hold a public hearing at least 30 days before the vote. During that 30-day period, the document that will be voted on has to be available. The law then says if you hold a public hearing and then you want to make changes, you have to hold a second public hearing on the changes. But you only have to provide the notice that the town usually gives for this kind of thing.
A week, right?
So, you know, realistically, there are kind of this comes at two ends. One is that typically before the select board puts something on the final warrant that's gonna be voted on, they've gotta have what it is that's gonna be voted on. And that occurs sometime before the town meeting, and I can never remember when they gotta have it and when they have to post it. But if you work back from there and say, okay, and then we want to create a window, so I'm gonna call it the George window, that says we need a week or 10 days if something comes up at the public hearing, that we have time to make some revisions, go through the formality of holding a second public hearing, or in this case, it would be probably the third public hearing, and then you can back up and say, okay, how far in advance do you need to hold the public hearing? I think MMA is gonna say you really only need 7 days of notice to meet the legal requirement.
Assuming and hoping these will
If
be
that's the
minor
only thing you're gonna do,
changes.
the only public opportunity, then providing more notice, providing an opportunity to make revisions after the public hearing, in my mind, becomes more important. If you say we're gonna hold 2 or 3 workshops to talk about the plan and review it and listen to it before we get to the public hearing, then the notice requirement can probably be, or the time for the notice can probably be less, because people are aware that it's out there, they know what it is. The people who are interested in it will look at it and come and see what it is. So I think it's kind of a function of, is it a one and done public hearing? Or is it some other things leading up to a public hearing? And to me, if you do some meetings, pre-meetings, you know, maybe you do, you know, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, for people who want to come and see what's in the plan. And then do the public hearing 2 or 3 weeks later.
Okay. All right, I will put my thinking cap on and come up with a strategy that I will send out to you for your approval.
May I-
I'm thinking that, number one, I think we could probably do a public hearing less than 30 days, because this is a revision to a plan that already existed. So I think, I'm optimistic that we can probably get within 30 days. The question then becomes, what can we do between the time we have a smooth edited copy and, let's say, the 8th of February, which is a couple of weeks? And that's the part that I'm debating, how we can finesse that, how we can have meaningful meetings with people who don't really have a lot of opportunity to look through the entire plan. I mean, I think it's doable, but,
We ran into issues with weather last year, too.
yeah, and then weather's
Never
the
know, but, yeah.
100-pound gorilla in the tent, yeah, so. But anyway, so that,
Find out where we're
let me,
at.
let me think about that, and I'll get together with the town staff, and I'll get back to you folks about what this timeline looks like. Hopefully, we can get February 8th as a public hearing, March 8th, town meeting. I mean, worst comes to worst, if we can't do this all, then we'd have to have a special town meeting at some time later, which is, you know,
Or we do
Nobody-
another year of
nobody
the
wants to do
committee.
that.
Well, let's just call the whole thing off.
So, okay, so I will take it upon myself to clarify that. I'll get back to you folks. I think we made progress tonight. We've gone through the future land use plan. I think we're good where we are on that. The housing, goals, policies, and strategies, I think we're good. The housing section, so progress. And I'm thinking about having an anchor article in December, in January. What do you folks think about what we might want to cover in January?
I think that's a good idea. It would be, and I'm agreeable to, let's say the plan comes out, and in that article, having one or two of us, even at the town office, on a Saturday morning, if people have questions, they could come in and talk,
Yeah,
ask them,
yeah,
rather than trying to set up special meetings in the winter.
all
It's
all
snowed out.
parts of the town, yeah. Just
Yeah.
people that are interested, yeah,
Because
That's a good
I
idea.
really like the idea of being able to talk to people ahead of a hearing.
yeah. Okay, that's
So
good.
create options for people who are interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay.
not demand that everybody.
No, just,
Including Zoom meetings, putting out a URL, so Zoom in on Saturday morning.
Okay. All right. Anything else tonight, before we face the gale winds of tomorrow?
I was hoping you had-
Hats off to our fishing brethren,
yes.
and stay safe out there.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Out of our hands at this point.
Anything else tonight?
We've done all we
Winter
can do.
blue.
Okay, hearing nothing, meeting's adjourned.